Hey there, Death, Sex, and Money listeners. Before we start the show, I want to let you know about something coming up a little later in the episode. It's about Brooklinen and me. With spring right around the corner, now's the perfect time to refresh your space and create a bedroom that aligns with your unique lifestyle. Whether you want to upgrade your bedding, add layers of comfort, or reimagine how you use your space, Brooklinen can help you create a dream-worthy bed. More on that later in the show. Shop award winners and fan faves in-store or online at brooklinen.com. That's BROOKLINEN.com. Get 15% off your first order today. Today's episode is sponsored by NerdWallet's Smart Money podcast. Life comes with big money questions like, are target date funds a smart or lazy way to invest? Or should you pay off your debt or invest extra cash? Or can you deduct your dog as a home security system on your taxes? NerdWallet's Smart Money podcast has answers to these kinds of questions. Their finance journalists break down investing strategies, tax planning, and smart ways to build wealth and navigate big financial decisions. Work smarter, not harder, on your finances this year. Follow NerdWallet's Smart Money podcast wherever you listen, and stay tuned until the end of the episode to hear the Smart Money trailer.
Hey, I just heard your request for personal stories about how our lives are changing because of the new administration slashing all kinds of federal programs and aid. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and we got hit really hard by Hurricane Helene. The road going up to my property fell off the mountain and into the river because of all the water coming from above and below. And we are all pretty dependent on FEMA programs right now to start recovering from the colossal damages. But no one knows what's going to happen to FEMA. All the Trump supporters who live around here are pretty anti-FEMA. But as a brand new property owner who can't even drive into her property, I am really, really, really hoping that FEMA comes through for me with aid.
If you live in the United States, you already know that this kind of uncertainty is pretty widespread at the moment. There have been cuts to the federal government, spending freezes, rapid-fire executive orders, and announcements from the president and his staff. Some government workers have lost jobs. Many others feel vulnerable. And we asked you, our listeners, how the fast pace of change in these last few weeks has affected your lives. Many of you feel in limbo. Others, like you're in some chaotic alternate reality, where even describing what's happening comes with its own risks.
Hi, DSM team. I'd rather not share my name because things right now are pretty scary and targeted. I will just say that I'm an employee of an agency under the Department of Education, and we are getting a lot of messaging that, number one, of course, they're trying to eradicate our department entirely. But even if they're unsuccessful in doing that, the way that they want to totally turn upside down our mission and work is horrifying.
We heard not just from people who work for the federal government, but also people whose work depends on federal money flowing down into local communities and organizations.
I work for a tiny nonprofit that focuses on sustainable agriculture and really working with farmers and ranchers and valuing what they do to both steward the land and feed us. And we get a big chunk of money from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and now it's just really uncertain. I think we'll be able to move different pieces of the project forward with different funding that we have, but what that looks like is really uncertain.
Hi, I work in infectious disease. So this means that I've spent my career studying bacteria and viruses that can make people sick. I'm currently paid by an NIH grant that is administered by my institution. But because review meetings where scientists get together to assess the worthiness of grants have been canceled indefinitely by the administration, The grant I'm on is in limbo, so I might not have a salary next year. So you could say, well, go get a new job. You have a lot of education, a lot of training. But the problem with this is that the funding that I have comes with a very, very prominent string attached. After the first year of being supported by this kind of grant, you then owe back another year of working in research. And the consequence if you don't stay in research is that you have to pay back your entire salary and benefits that you earned in the first year. I could be both out of a job and owe about $60,000 back to the government.
I work for a nonprofit, a non-government organization, and we've been in chaos since January 20th. My company, we've been around for over 60 years. We do public health and education, and we have always thrived under both Republicans and Democrats. And honestly, I don't know we're going to make it. Honestly, that anxiety is really overshadowed, though, by the anger and the heartbreak I feel because of the way this work and the people who do this work is being degraded and how it's being villainized. We're being villainized. I think we're turning our country into a really dark place where trying to make things better is no longer, not even just funded, it's just no longer valued. It's seen as bad.
This is a refrain we heard multiple times from federal workers and people in the nonprofit sector. They feel like their public service work is being devalued and is under attack.
I really genuinely like what I do. I like my job. I like my coworkers. I want to stay. But nobody wants to work for someone who doesn't respect you. And it's very clear right now that the people who are in charge of the federal workforce don't respect us. And that's hard.
This is Death, Sex, and Money, the show from Slate about the things we think about a lot and need to talk about more. I'm Anna Sale. We first heard from a listener we're calling Beth back in January. And the voice memo she sent us caught our attention because it's from someone no one usually wants to get a call from.
I am an IRS attorney. Don't hang up yet. The last month or so has been, well, really stressful. When they announced all of the changes, getting rid of DEI, getting rid of telework, I started looking at jobs in the private sector. Then once they sent out the fork you emails, as we've been calling them, I just got mad. They're so insulting. I mean, oh yeah, I'd be better in the private sector. I've gone to court and beaten attorneys from top law firms. I got that email and I was like, screw resigning. You could drag me out of this office kicking and screaming.
Beth is not her real name. Like a lot of people who reached out, she saw no reason to risk putting her name on the record. What Beth is talking about here is a deferred resignation offer. She and lots of other federal workers got an email that offered pay through September if they volunteered to resign. When we talked, Beth was still pretty mad about that email.
I mean, calling people, low productivity or however they phrased it. I mean, basically the gist of it is like, hey, don't you want to get paid not to work for the next, however many months? It's a great deal. Like, oh, you either don't know who is working for the federal government or you don't care. One of those is true, because we don't actually just want to get paid to do nothing for 9 months. Like, we take our job seriously. We want to get paid to do work. Like, we normally do.
The deferred resignation offer isn't the only thing Beth has been upset by. She's also frustrated that the Trump administration will soon require her to work in a government office. Right now, Beth mostly works from home because her office is really far away, sometimes a 4-hour commute round trip. If she can't work from home some, there are parts of her life that will need to change.
I probably will have to move. I think the commute that I have, if I'm doing it 5 days a week, is probably, it does not feel sustainable long term. And I think it's going to change our lives in terms of kids and how we think about kids and how many and how we situate that. And it's also all of these little things that are sort of hard to quantify. I don't want to move. I love my house. Like, I love where I live. But that is something that is most likely doable. I think what makes me sad is that I think that's not going to be the case for everybody. And I work with very, very good people. And I know that some of them probably will end up not being able to stay in the positions that they're in.
Beth says that this telework policy update is being framed as a back to the office kind of thing, like it's a return to how things were before the pandemic. But for her and her government work, that framing is not accurate.
Federal employees have been teleworking for a really long time, and most of my work is not done with people that are physically located near me. It's done with people all across the country because that's just how our cases tend to work. And I know a lot of people, not everyone, I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but a lot of us do work more than 40 hours a week. But we are able to shuffle those hours around. Mm-hmm. The problem is, if I'm working on site, once I go home, if I can't work from home, once I go home, I go home. And that means that, realistically speaking, overall, I think the government will probably be getting fewer hours from the same amount of people.
And Beth really does care about productivity in her workplace. She likes her job and thinks it's important. And while she knows the IRS doesn't have the best reputation, she does think it's essential.
I think of it more as I'm working for the taxpayers of America as sort of a group. I mean, when we start at the agency, one of the things that they always tell us is that your cases are not designed for you to win. Your cases are designed for you to get to whatever the right result is. And sometimes something will get to me and I will realize that the IRS actually did something incorrectly. Mm-hmm. And it's just as important that I catch those cases as it is that I go after the people who are trying to get out of paying their taxes, which, makes it harder for everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back in time a little bit. You go to college. You end up going to law school. How did you find yourself landing at the IRS? Was this sort of a vision for the kind of attorney that you wanted to be?
I was always very interested in going into government service as opposed to private practice for quite a few different reasons.
Tell me, what were they? What were some of the things that drew you to being a government attorney?
So one of my grandfathers worked, he was in World War II. And then after that, he worked in various government positions for a long time. And he's always been kind of the person who I most aspire to be as a person, if that makes sense. He was just one of those people who genuinely was interested in other people, who wanted to make other people's lives better. And part of it was that I would not make a good soldier in any sense of the word ever. But this is a way that I feel like I can still, I mean, it's still called civil service, and I do think of it that way. I mean, obviously I get paid. I'm not going to pretend that this is some like grand, sacrifice on my part. But I did like the idea of doing something that I felt like made the world a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. And your job, one way to describe it could be, your job is to make sure that corporations and our fellow citizens and taxpayers don't lie and cheat and steal money from the rest of us to pay for things that we've agreed as Americans through our lawmakers that we value and need to pay for.
Yes, I think that's a good description of the way I think about it. And I'm always doing the same thing, which is trying to figure out whether they need to pay taxes, and if so, what the right amount is. Like, it's not... This is hard because I don't want to make it sound like I'm such a wonderful person or something like that. I'm not. That's just but the emphasis is like, that's just the baseline of what I do. I'm not special. Like and I'm not going to say that like there's no one in federal government that's not like an asshole to people. But I think at the end of the day, it's kind of like that is just... It's just a bunch of us trying to make sure that we do our jobs well, And I think there's so much stuff that as a society, it's kind of invisible. You'd notice if like your mail just stopped being delivered one day, right? But there's all this kind of stuff that is happening behind the scenes where like, if the government shuts down, you wouldn't notice it right away because it might not touch you directly, but you'll notice it eventually. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a lot of stuff that the federal government does that people think is optional, and they don't realize that the downstream effects are going to touch them. It just might take enough time that the damage might not be reversible anymore.
Coming up, we hear from more people who are feeling the impacts of big changes and announcements from the top, including Jackie, an Army sergeant who works in IT and is a trans woman. How long have people called you Jackie at work?
Well, everybody uses my last name at work for the Army.
So it's like changing your first name isn't that big of a deal because no one ever says it. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
This week, you're hearing just some of the stories of government workers who've lost their jobs or fear their job is in danger. And of course, there are also so many untold stories out there. This week, in our Slate Plus feed, you'll hear an ode to a public servant from the writer Tommy Tomlinson. He hosts a podcast called Southbound, where he interviews artists, writers, and thinkers who are from or currently living all over the South. I love Tommy's writing. His most recent book is called Dogland, and it's about dog shows and also about humans' relationships with dogs. It's moving. It's funny. Like the way Tommy describes why he has to use the word bitch a lot in the copy. It's used a lot at dog shows.
Yes. With the golden retriever bitches, please report to ring 3. Yeah.
But this week, what I really wanted to talk to Tommy about was his brother-in-law, Ed, who worked for the city of Jessup, Georgia, for most of his career. It's a moving conversation about public service and how it matters to a community.
He wasn't famous. He wasn't rich. He wasn't notorious. He was just a good dude. And we don't write about good dudes enough.
You can hear my conversation with Tommy Tomlinson in the Slate Plus feed of Death, Sex, and Money. If you have not yet joined to become a Slate Plus member, please do so. You can join right in Apple Podcast at the Death, Sex, and Money show page. Just click Try Free. You can also find a link to join in the Spotify show page for Death, Sex, and Money, or just go to slate.com/DSM Plus. We like making these special Slate Plus drops for you. It's where we can stretch out a little bit and kind of try to make meaning out of the things we're making episodes about, which I found was really important this week. This episode is brought to you by Discover. If you've listened to Death, Sex, and Money for a while, you know how important acceptance is when it comes to personal growth. And you know who else is big on acceptance? Discover. You see, Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. That's a whole lot of places and a whole lot of acceptance, which is great for Discover, but even better for you. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report, learn more at discover.com/creditcard. Spring is right around the corner, and it's a perfect time to refresh everything from our mindsets to the special places in our homes. One way I like to update my space for the new season is embracing lighter textures and transitional layers that bring warmth without the weight. And I also, spring cleaning, it makes me appreciate how I'm growing and changing. Because listen, longtime listeners to this show, you may know that I have not always been the most attentive when it comes to tending my home. Vacuuming has never been my jam. I am a piles person more than an everything in its place person. But do you know what is making me turn a new page? Brooklinen sheets. I get excited to strip the bed, to come up with a fresh combination of sheets to go with the duvet cover, just to change up the personality of my bedroom. Sometimes I'm feeling sage green and kind of a dusty taupe together. Other times, life calls for crisp white at every level. And whatever the color, I love Brooklinen's luxe sateen feel. These sheets are cool and soft. And it's just nice to know that no matter how chaotic everything else is, the place where I rest is predictably soothing and comfortable. Brooklinen's customizable bundles make it easy to refresh your bed and bathroom by putting everything you need in one place. Brooklinen's super high-quality products have been tested and awarded by experts, and their sheets are tried and true with over 200,000 five-star reviews and millions of happy customers. Shop award winners and fan faves in-store or online at brooklinen.com. That's BROOKLINEN.com. And get 15% off your first order today.
Get the Angel Reese special at McDonald's now. Let's break it down. My favorite barbecue sauce, American cheese, crispy bacon, pickles, onions, and a sesame seed bun, of course. And don't forget the fries and a drink. Sound good? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating restaurants for a limited time.
This is Death, Sex, and Money from Slate. I'm Anna Sale. When we asked for your stories about how your lives are changing in response to this moment in the federal government, we heard from many people about the ideological shifts of this administration. We heard from one Jewish listener who wrote in about feeling more assured by President Trump after October 7th, so much so that it made her a single-issue voter. We also heard from other listeners about the new Trump administration policies to eliminate diversity and inclusion programs and to bar trans people from the armed forces. That executive order from the Trump administration states that, quote, a man's assertion that he is a woman and his requirement that others honor this falsehood is not consistent with the humility and selflessness required of a service member. We heard from some of you who wondered how that kind of language from the top could be changing what it means for you to just move around in America.
Hi, Dust, Sex, and Money. With the start of the second Trump administration, my wife and I will be moving to Canada. My wife is a Canadian citizen, but she's also transgender, and we have a 5-year-old daughter, and we know that it is just not safe to stay in this country.
Hey, Death, Sex, and Money. I am genderqueer, which means I am part of the transgender community, and so many of my friends and I are curious how this is going to affect our travel. I have an X on my state ID, and I just booked flights for the first time last night to travel in March. And I don't know if this means they won't allow me to travel when I'm just flying domestically with my ID, but my passport doesn't have an X, so should I just bring that? But yeah, this is a very uncertain time, and what the fuck?
We also heard from a listener in San Diego, a gay man, who has started wearily eyeing other people in his community.
I don't feel safe living in my apartment without a firearm. I don't feel safe with my neighbors. I don't know who has been harboring bigoted sentiments or who has been radicalized. I was out in an urban area called North Park, and it wasn't even that late at night, maybe like 8 p.m. or something like that. And there's a big North Park sign, NORTHPARK, and at the end of the sign, there were 2 white girls doing the Nazi salute with one leg kicked out so that their bodies formed the shape of a K at the end of the North Park sign, doing the Nazi salute and making this KKK thing. And I was just so shocked to see this, and I have been an out gay male for, my entire adult life. I don't see a situation where we're going to be safe, and I feel like I need to arm myself, and I need to prepare to fight or flee.
We heard from another listener whose fear of discrimination is more than just fear. It's happening. Jackie is a sergeant in the U.S. Army. She works in IT. She's been a service member for more than 4 years, and she's a trans woman. She transitioned while serving in the Army, her health care paid for by the government. And just last week, the Trump administration released a legal memo indicating its intention to ban trans people from serving in the military. But when I talked to Jackie, that hadn't come down yet. The administration had announced that trans people couldn't join, but Jackie wasn't sure what that would mean for her current work in the Army, for her health care, or her ability to re-up for another 4 years, as she's been planning.
I feel kind of disgruntled about the whole thing just because there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding everything. I had surgery scheduled for August of this year, and I got that scheduled back in like September or something. So I was planning on waiting like a year for this, but it's looking like that's probably not going to happen at this point. For the time being, my hormonal care is safe-ish, I guess. At least the memos that have come out from both the Secretary of Defense and the Department of the Army, they haven't said that they're going to stop it for me yet. Mm-hmm. But I'm anticipating not really being able to initiate a new prescription or either renew my current prescription. And then I'm also concerned about once, if I'm forced to exit the military, what my care through the VA is going to look like and whether they're going to continue covering my care once I'm already out.
Mm-hmm. Could we go back a little bit? And I want to understand both the trajectory of your career in the military, how it started, and also your experience as a trans person and accessing the medical care that you currently have.
Yeah.
How old are you now?
I'm 23 right now.
23. How old were you when you joined the military?
I was 19 when I joined.
Uh-huh.
So I joined the Army just kind of intending to do like a little 4-year contract. But right now I'm over 4 years now, and I'm planning to stay in mostly out of spite at this point. But
out of spite as a trans service person?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, with the whole kind of purges in the federal government going on, not just within the military, but within other organizations like DHS, the Treasury, and things like that, then I feel like I should stay in to kind of help people like me who may or may not get into the military after me, because I don't think other people would necessarily speak up for them if I'm not going to.
And the Army that is serving in the military, is that something that you had family members who'd been in the military? Why was enlisting attractive to you?
Well, actually, I'm the only one in my immediate family who's been in the military. But it kind of attracted me just because it was like I could do something somewhat important without having to go through so many years of schooling. Like I could sign my life away and get a job and go do something halfway across the world for however long I felt like doing it for. And that's kind of what ended up happening. Because I went to my job school for like 6 months after basic training, and then I ended up serving overseas in Korea for a year, and then coming back to the States in Maryland now. I'm getting ready to I was hoping to re-enlist for another assignment overseas in Europe, but it remains to be seen whether I'm able to be retained within the military or not.
So it was sort of the appeal of structured adventure?
I would say so. I've always been a really kind of independent person, which, the military doesn't really allow you to be that independent, but it let me get away from my family and kind of explore the world on my own and become my own person, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And how old were you when you started thinking about your gender identity?
So the first time I could really consider thinking about it was when I was 15. But even before that, like if you go back to when I was a little kid, there were signs that I was a little bit different from most of the kids growing up. But when I was 15 was the first time I really started to consider, maybe I'm actually a bit different than most of the other boys in my high school. And I ended up like making friends with some other girls in my class, and they ended up like teaching me how to do makeup and things like that. And, one thing leads to another, and I'm like, wow, maybe, maybe I am trans or something like that. And of course, I'm a little scared 15-year-old kid. I get scared of how my family will react and things like that. So I kind of try to put those thoughts on the back burner for however long I can. And then I finally actually came out when I was 22, early last year. And I've just been transitioning ever since. So and it's
22, so it's been a little over a year. When you say came out, what did that mean?
So originally I made a friend back like 2 years ago now, and they had discussed with me like, oh, hey, would you ever like consider starting HRT or something like that, like hormone therapy? And I was like, oh, I don't know, maybe after I get out of the Army, that's something I do, and I'll move far away and nobody will recognize me or know me, and I can just do my own thing. But after that conversation, I was like, oh, it's fine, whatever. But that night I ended up having like a panic attack or something like that. And I was like, well, maybe, maybe I should do this. And like later that week, I think I made a appointment with my therapist to kind of discuss this issue. And things didn't necessarily move quickly from there. The Army is a very bureaucratic process to get any kind of significant paperwork like that done.
When you describe after that conversation, thinking you could put it aside, thinking being a trans person and being in the Army are not something I can do at the same time. I'm going to put it aside. And then your body, your emotions sort of welled up in a panic attack. Like,
Yeah.
Can you, if it's okay, would you mind just explain, like, what do you remember about when that swelled up? Like, what was the feeling?
Well, I was actually in bed that night and I was trying to go to sleep. But, sometimes when you're trying to fall asleep and you're tossing and turning, you just got a lot of thoughts running through your head.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like that. I just couldn't get the thought of it out of my head. And it was just this kind of like regretful feeling like, oh, I have to do, like, I can't not do this at this point, and I'm going to have to deal with all the social stigma and, public kind of humiliation rituals, if you can call them that, of being trans in public. So it was kind of just like these thoughts that like, my life is totally changed. And I was just like, oh shit, I don't know what I'm going to do or how my life is going to look following this, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was really kind of an intense feeling.
Yeah.
Because I felt like I was completely powerless and there wasn't really anything I could do. I just had to abide by this change that I now knew I needed.
This episode is brought to you by Discover. If you've listened to Death, Sex, and Money for a while, you know how important acceptance is when it comes to personal growth. And you know who else is big on acceptance? Discover. You see, Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. That's a whole lot of places and a whole lot of acceptance, which is great for Discover, but even better for you. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report, learn more at discover.com/credit card. Are you in the market for a weight loss solution that works? Weight Loss by Hers provides access to affordable weight loss treatment plans, including GLP-1 medications, and personalized care to help you hit your goals. Hers offers a holistic weight loss program with personalized solutions, including compounded GLP-1 weekly injections, featuring the same active ingredient as Ozempic and Wegovy or oral medication kits. What you do is you submit an online intake form, and a licensed medical provider will determine what plan is best for you. If prescribed, your program includes medication delivered straight to your door, ongoing care, and online support, all at one low cost. Compounded GLP-1 injections start at $165 per month with a 12-month plan paid up front for new subscribers. Start your initial free online visit today at forhers.com/DSM. That's FORHERS.com/DSM for your personalized weight loss treatment options. forhers.com/DSM. Hers weight loss is not available everywhere. Compounded products are not FDA approved or verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. Restrictions apply. Wegovy and Ozempic are not compounded. Actual price depends on product and plan purchased. When I talked to Jackie, an Army sergeant, I wanted to know how her coworkers have reacted to her transition. Before she started the process, she told me she was worried about getting respect from her peers. Did you know anybody in the Army who's trans?
Yes, actually. Prior to that, that was kind of one of the reasons that I was so hesitant to come out or kind of be myself. Because there was a trans soldier at my unit in Korea, and she did get a lot of flack for being trans, and people kind of gave her the side eye and things like that. And just seeing how she was kind of sequestered away from the rest of the unit, that kind of gave me pause. And then even prior to that, I was in... when I was doing my job training, we had an instructor who was transgender, and just hearing all the jokes kind of made about her were kind of disheartening to see. I won't repeat them, but they weren't very, very kind to her.
Despite watching that happen, Jackie decided to transition anyway. She rose to the rank of NCO, non-commissioned officer. That means she's like a middle manager with a handful of people serving under her. And she sees the position as an opportunity to educate her peers about being trans and to be a more general mentor to those coming up behind her.
You have a lot of people who don't really have any experience outside of their homes with their families. So, people come in and they don't know how to do their own laundry, or they don't have driver's licenses, and so they need rides to work from different people. And it's just like, well, I know these people would like somehow survive on the outside, because if there was no army, then they'd still have to get a job and make money and things like that. But I don't know what they would do. But I can't really say I was that much different from most of the privates coming in when I first joined the Army.
You were also clueless?
I was pretty clueless. I got yelled at a lot.
And so where you were in your kind of Army job and the kind of service you were doing and where you were living, when you started transitioning, was there anything about how you identified with your gender that changed which slot you went in as far as the military was concerned?
There's a whole process within the Army or just any branch of the military to get your gender marker changed and get all your medical treatment approved. So for me, at least, like once my gender marker changed to female, then that's basically it. Like I abide by female standards. I use female facilities like bathrooms, lodging, things like that.
Are you saving money in a different way than you were a month ago? Are you do you feel like your job security is not what it was?
Well, I definitely don't feel like my job is as secure as it used to be. That's kind of concerning. Because I wasn't really planning to get out this year. I was planning to, extend my contract or re-enlist for an overseas assignment. But it's looking less and less like that's possible at this point. I don't know what the policy will look like. So if I re-enlist for 3 years to go to Germany or something like that, I don't know if a week later the policy changes and I am basically forced to detransition and I have to abide by male standards and cut my hair and things like that. So I don't want to be stuck in a situation where I'm stuck in a contract for 3 years, but I'm also forced to detransition. Because I don't think I would be a very effective soldier if I was forced to do that.
Being forced to detransition, I hadn't thought that through. So that you wouldn't have access to hormones, you would have to abide by male standards of appearance. Do you feel like that's a possibility?
I feel like it's somewhat of a worse outcome than just being kicked out, at least in my opinion. Because it's, according to the memos and the executive orders, we're inherently dishonorable and untrustworthy and things like that. And, I feel like it would just be kind of a death of myself. I'd still be alive and walking around, but I wouldn't really be a complete person. And I wouldn't be able to give my all to my soldiers.
Jackie, is this coming up at work? Do your colleagues who know you're a trans person, acknowledge the things that you're wondering about, going through, asking questions about right now? Does it come up?
It comes up sometimes. Mostly a lot of interesting questions. Somebody asked me a couple weeks back, they're like, well, what if you just said you were gay? Gay people are cool now. And I was like, well, I could do that, but my whole medical record just says that I'm trans. So I'm which I thought was kind of funny. And then I get a lot of people who don't really think it's as serious as it is, or that I'm under as much threat as I am. Just because I guess people don't imagine, I feel like people don't imagine or can't conceive of the thought that bad things can really happen in this country. I am being discriminated against by the federal government, and it's somewhat insulting for me, just because I've, given 4 years of my life to this country, and I want to continue giving more years to them. But um, some people care a lot about my personal choices and medical history and things like that.
On hard days, do you feel like you've got enough support?
Well, my girlfriend is kind of my biggest support system.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I've got a good support system at my job, just with like my immediate coworkers that I work with. They're all pretty supportive. Sometimes people can say some ignorant things at work, but I'm fine if it's ignorant. It's just, don't be hateful about it. I'm always happy to kind of explain my situation to people. But sometimes I'm just kind of alone in bed, wondering why all of this is happening or why people care so much about me being trans. So it is kind of difficult sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And you tell me if you don't want to talk about this, but you mentioned part of your interest in serving was getting some space from your family. Are you in touch with your family of origin?
Yes. Me and my father are somewhat estranged. And then I talk to my sister and my grandparents a lot, though.
Does your family understand how the new presidency is affecting you?
Well, that's kind of the big problem with my relationship with my dad, I guess. Because he's a big Trump supporter, and he's kind of, all he does is watch like Fox News and Newsmax and Tim Pool all day. And I try to explain to him, I'm like, I feel really hurt that you voted for Trump, and you have me as your daughter, and I'm serving in the military, and you're like proud of me serving in the military, but then you're still voting to fire me. So I have a lot of confusing and negative emotions around him.
One of the things when you were, I was struck how you said, like, I don't mind ignorant questions as long as they're not hateful.
Yeah.
When you have conversations with your coworkers who have questions, who you feel like you're educating, does that feel important to you to like spend the time to do that? To help them understand your experience?
I think so. I think that's kind of the most important thing that I can kind of do on my level, just as an individual. Because I think like exposure therapy is kind of one of the most effective means of getting someone accepted in society. Like I gave a whole class to my unit kind of explaining, what's going on and why I look different and what the policy is in case you have a soldier who comes to you and they say they're trans, later on down the line. Because I wanted like most of the people in the military that I've spoken to regarding any kind of transgender service, they're extremely ignorant on the policy. So I feel like kind of just giving a baseline level to people was good, because it's not really for me. It's for people who come after me, because I've already done everything and I did it by myself, but I'd rather people after me have some help and at least some kind of visibility.
So you did like a pop-up workplace workshop?
Pretty much, yeah.
When was that?
This is back in October, November.
Jackie, it's just like, not only are you just kind of transitioning at work, you're getting on hormones, you're not hiding.
No, I mean, I'm very proud. So, because I don't know, I feel like most people don't know another trans person besides me, at least at work. So I feel like if I'm, I hate to be like the model minority, but that's kind of the situation I've been forced into. Or if I'm a good example, I feel like then we'll be more accepted in society.
And so how did it hit you reading the memos from the Secretary of Defense talking about trans people being unfit to serve?
Well, I don't know. It was kind of disheartening to read them, especially the executive order from the president. But then also, I thought it was kind of funny that I printed off the executive order and I posted it on the outside of my cubicle. at work. Just because I thought it was so funny. I was like, wow, the president is calling me a piece of trash. Wow, this is great. But I don't know. It was just kind of a strange feeling that I had. It's definitely strange to be such a small yet targeted minority that people care so much about for some reason. Like anybody you talk to will have an opinion about trans people, not even just trans people serving, just trans people in general. Having never met anybody like me.
You printed the executive order and put it outside your cubicle.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I had people like walk by and I was like, here, read this. Do I look like I'm inherently distrustful, dishonorable, lack humility or selflessness that's generally required of a soldier? And everybody's like, well, no. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. This is stupid. Like, I don't really know how else to put it. It's just kind of, I just feel disrespected. It's just honestly the most disrespected I've ever felt by anyone in the government.
Jackie and I recorded this conversation a few weeks ago, back in mid-February. Then, the Department of Defense released a legal memo on February 26th. It reads in part, service members who have a current diagnosis or history of or exhibit symptoms consistent with gender dysphoria are disqualified from military service. There are some exceptions. Jackie doesn't believe she'd qualify for any of them. And she sent us a recording after that memo was released.
It's extremely insulting to read the memo that got pushed out on the 26th, and I don't really know how to describe my feelings other than I feel a deep betrayal from the country that I swore to protect. It's quite shocking just reading through the policy memo, as there are a lot of interesting and horrible things to find. One of those is the potential to have your bonus recouped by the government if you're involuntarily separated for being transgender. I don't think this will hold up in court, but I'm not a lawyer, so it remains to be seen, but I'm going to keep fighting to stay on because I don't want to leave yet. I want to continue serving my country.
That's Jackie, a sergeant in the U.S. Army. Thank you to all of you who shared stories of what's happening in your life and work right now, and please keep in touch. We know things are changing really quickly. This episode was produced by Cameron Drews. The rest of the Death, Sex, and Money show team includes Andrew Dunn and Zoe Azoulay. Daisy Rosario is our senior supervising producer at Slate. Hillary Fry is Slate's editor-in-chief. Please support the production of our show by becoming a member of Slate Plus. You'll not only be supporting our team and its production work, you'll also get access to benefits like ad-free listening and special Slate Plus drops from us, at least 2 a month. You can subscribe directly from the Death, Sex, and Money show page on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or just go to slate.com/DSM Plus to get access wherever you listen. Our theme music is by the Reverend John DeLore and Steve Lewis. If you're new to our show, welcome. We're glad you're here. You can find us and follow us on Instagram at DeathSexMoney. And I write a weekly newsletter. You can subscribe at annasale.substack.com. You can also email us anytime to tell us your stories, offer critiques. Our email address is deathsexmoney@slate.com. We love hearing from you. Again, thanks for reaching out while you're trying to figure out how your life is changing. Keep them coming. Here's one more.
I am a humanitarian aid worker, and one of the ways that friends and I, who are all in the same world, have been trying to cope is through humor. And part of that has been developing a sort of bingo type game where we brainstorm some of the absurd things that could happen as a result of the new administration and assign points to those potential events, all in the spirit of hoping that, of course, none of these things happen, but really trying to also cope in a way that recognizes the limited power and influence that we have over the situation, and to take some of that back by channeling that in ways that can be forms of self-care and better coping.
I'm Anna Sale, and this is Death, Sex, and Money from Slate.
Today's episode is sponsored by NerdWallet's Smart Money podcast. Money can be confusing. Should you invest in ETFs, get a travel rewards credit card, buy a house, or just build a really fancy pillow fort?
That could work. No shame in pillow fort game. Or you could just tune in for clear, research-backed financial insights.
I'm Sean Piles, a certified financial planner professional.
And I'm Elizabeth Ayola. We're the hosts of NerdWallet's Smart Money podcast, where you bring the money questions and we bring trustworthy information backed by NerdWallet's expert analysis, without the jargon or the sales pitch.
Our nerds do the research so you don't have to. We'll help you understand your options so you can make the best decision for your situation, from optimizing your investments and maximizing credit card rewards to making big money moves with confidence.
Plus, we keep it real. No lectures, no judgment. Just tips and tools you can use to build wealth and take control of your finances. Think of us as your financial GPS, helping you navigate your money decisions and avoid expensive wrong turns.
Whether you're planning for retirement, weighing a big purchase, or just want to make your money work harder for you, we've got insights that you can use in real life.
So, if you want practical, straightforward, and actually useful financial knowledge, plus a little bit of fun along the way, follow NerdWallet's Smart Money podcast on your favorite podcast app.
Trust us, future you will thank you.
Get the Angel Reese special at McDonald's now. Let's break it down. My favorite barbecue sauce, American cheese, crispy bacon, pickles, onions, and a sesame seed bun, of course. And don't forget the fries and a drink. Sound good? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating restaurants for a limited time.